Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, September 10th, 2021. All I can say is, a couple of things that I can say include, the invocation of thank God it's Friday. And I actually am very happy that it's Friday. I'm extremely pleased to learn at this point that September 11th, the 20th anniversary of September 11th, will fall on a Saturday. So, well, for one thing, from a selfish perspective, we don't have to deal with it here on the air and do the hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's just 20th anniversary of 9/11. We're so somber, and it's kind of an awkward thing to have to deal with. So, luckily, I guess the weekend people, and I don't know. Actually, I don't know what happens. What happens here on weekends on Netroots Radio? I'm sleeping by the time it comes around. So anyway, maybe I'm a weekend person. I don't know. Runs and reruns. But weekend anchor people on the television news will have to deal with it. I assume they'll probably throw some things. They've already been putting some things on TV in the morning anyway, just so that the weekday people get a chance to do their somber act and put it on their reel, I guess. I don't know. Then, of course, we have to deal with it. And then, of course, speaking with or talking about it, if we were a more prominent show, I'm sure the conservatives would be scooping this up and saying, see, he's not being properly somber about it right now. Therefore, liberals hate America. Meanwhile, of course, Republicans are opposing as tyranny the vaccine mandates announced by President Biden last night. And I guess, technically, are we talking about mandates? Everyone's using that word. And I think everyone is ready to use that word, wants to use that word. At this point, it looks like the polling in favor of these moves is pretty strong. I guess what's the best way of describing what happened? I guess just giving the details of it. I guess every employer or every company with more than 100 employees, I suppose, now under an OSHA mandate, right? The Occupational Safe and Health Administration, by virtue of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, there's two different OSHAs here, is now empowered to fine companies that don't comply with a policy of mandating that all your workers, if you are over 100 employees, are either vaccinated or they get the chance to opt out. They can instead submit to a regime of weekly COVID testing. And, I think it's pretty much designed to make the employers prefer the vaccination. I mean, quite honestly, you put that choice to any employer and say, well, you can keep employees as long as you test them for COVID weekly. Well, then the burden of it, the cost of it falls on the company. And, the other option is you go get on your own time a free vaccine. They might perhaps consider bringing a vaccine clinic on board at the site if they think that they've got a large number of unvaccinated employees who are willing to go with the vaccination. But this largely echoes what private companies have been doing anyway, either through announcing that their unvaccinated personnel would pay higher rates for insurance, employer-provided insurance, or at least partially employer-provided, or anecdotally, I saw circulating on Twitter, I thought one of the more interesting shows of force by employers, I guess circulating an email basically saying that by November 1st, you either have to be vaccinated or you're out. And that offering you the various options of either click here, either you are fully vaccinated already, or you are partially vaccinated, or you have made an appointment to begin getting the vaccine administered. Or I guess another option that they offered you apparently is, well, I am otherwise ineligible for or would otherwise pose a danger medically for me to get the vaccine, and I would like to discuss that with you and talk about an exemption, which you may or may not get. Or the last option, I understand what this offer is all about, and I refuse to get the vaccine, and I will be voluntarily resigning from my position on November 2nd. Okay, well, tough play. Here on the federal level, you're subject to OSHA fines if you don't comply with one of the two options, either vaccinate all your employees or test them for COVID weekly. And like I said, there's not going to be a lot of employers who are willing to take on the cost of and trouble of weekly COVID testing. They're going to pressure you to get the vaccine. There will be holdout companies, privately owned companies with more than 100 employees, where the owner is like the MyPillow guy, for instance. I assume he'll defy the whole thing, and he'll be fined by OSHA, and he'll sue to block OSHA from levying those fines or being allowed to levy those fines. And probably likely, if the rule of law and precedent means anything, lose in court. But of course, over the past couple of weeks, we've been talking quite a bit about the possibility of Republican-appointed judges and justices, depending on how far this goes in the courts, simply abandoning the principle of dedication to precedent, of preserving precedent, and ruling predictably within the bounds of what used to be called the rule of law. They could, of course, divert from all this and just do something completely different, or rule for no particular reason that the president or OSHA don't have the power to do this, even though they have had the power to do this in the past and it's well established. They will say, because reasons, or because we don't want to tell you what our reasons are, we won't write anything. You just can't do this anymore. I mean, that option is out there. A couple of other things that were announced in the mandate, and I don't even remember what they are. Who cares? That's the important part, quite honestly. And Republican governors, of course, immediately jumped into playing the game of riling the base and saying, we are going to defy or fight back against some or all of this mandate. That is, they will, they'll sue to enjoin the mandate from taking effect. They will sue OSHA. They will claim some sort of state power to regulate workplace safety, et cetera, et cetera. But they're all out there, all the ones with an interest in running for president one day or taking over a higher leadership position inside the Republican Party, insisting that they're going to fight the mandate aimed at making their own citizens' lives better, their residents of these states. And a couple of them, the most notorious of the Republicans out there, who, of course, have made themselves most notorious by resisting everything and thereby infecting their states at higher levels than most, have been out there mouthing off about how they're going to defy this. And the mouthiest among them include the ones with the worst records, of course. And I don't know, I found it instructive, at least to me, and I think to a number of other people, judging by the popularity of the tweets, to take the worst of the worst governors and their rhetoric about how they're going to resist and point out how many people have died in their states. And plenty of people have done that, but I wanted to put a different spin on the numbers. I mean, they're the same numbers, but if you look at them in various ways, sometimes it makes sense to people. Like, for instance, it doesn't seem to impact people, for whatever reason, if they're just dedicated to this sort of resistance, that 675,000 Americans, or at least residents of the United States, have died from COVID already. That is well over, as I've told you by the way the statistics are reported, well over 2,000 deaths per million residents, or, looked at another way, 1 in every 500 residents of the United States is already dead from COVID. That's actually a pretty remarkable statistic, and one that strikes people a lot differently than talking about the 675,000 number, or especially if you're talking about it in terms of a percentage of the population, because it's like 0.2% of the population, and people scoff at that. But 1 in 500 somehow hits people differently, because of course you can make analogies to situations where people do get a sense of how many people is 500 people, or some multiple of 500 people, and put it in a context that they can understand. And of course, many states have records considerably worse than that. The the governor of Mississippi, what's his name? Tater Tot, something or other? Tate Reeves, I think. He too came out with his strong statement of, we're rebels here in the South and we're going to resist against this thing. Mississippi, currently with the second worst record in the country in terms of the number of deaths per million. New Jersey, unfortunately, still occupies that position, but you won't find the governor of New Jersey resisting efforts to try to control that number. In Mississippi, well, you do. 1 in every 335 residents of Mississippi already now dead and buried from COVID. And there's a good number that still have it there, whose cases are unresolved, and there are thousands more who will be diagnosed with it in the next day or two, and thousands more than that who are going to get it in the next week or so. And, who knows how much longer this goes on. But for every, where you have these high death rates, even when it's a low percentage of the people who catch it, lots of the deniers are interested in clinging to that. Oh, it's got a 99% survival rate. Well, actually slightly less than that. A little closer to 98%, but that doesn't scare them either. But a 2% death rate among the people who contract the virus in places like Mississippi, if there are 1,000 people who have it right now, and that there are closer to 10,000, let's go do the math. Just as long as we're going to talk through it, right? Let's go over to Worldometers and grab up the reports by state, and again, check the deaths. Mississippi drawing very close to New Jersey. I gave you the numbers, I think, the other day. 3,042 deaths per million in New Jersey, where there are 8.8 million people, or were anyway. And now in Mississippi, 2,980 deaths per million, but of course only 2.9 million people in the state, so each additional death is just that much more impactful. But I guess there are 62 deaths per million difference between the two states. It's getting awfully close, and Mississippi is adding in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 new deaths per million each day. Whereas New Jersey is inching along. They continue to add. It's unfortunate, but much closer to 1 to 2 deaths per day. So that 62 death gap will close very quickly. So where were we? 8,870 people dead and buried in Mississippi as it is. And, well, with 335, or 1 out of every 335 people dying that way, just try to put it in terms that they might be able to grasp. If they, even if 1 in 335 doesn't hit them the same way, I started to put it in terms of what would happen if it was equivalent to going to a big football game in one of these states, or one of the big college football games, and that's one of their favorite pastimes, and that's something that they can grasp and think about, and it hits people differently. So down in Mississippi, I understand they play a little football down there as well, right? So Ole Miss, if you were to go to one of their big games and you go to their big stadium, their stadium capacity, as it turns out, I looked it up, is just over 64,000 seats at Ole Miss Vaught Hemingway Stadium. I don't know if it's Vote or Vaught, how they say it, but anyway, that's their stadium. And I'll tell you what, out of the 64,000 people, 191 of them won't give a damn one way or the other how the stadium is pronounced, because they're dead before the game is over. I mean, if you think about that, that's the equivalent we're talking about. 1 out of every 335 residents in Mississippi translates to every time there's an Ole Miss game and 64,000 fans fill the stadium, almost 200 of them won't walk out. They're going to drop dead in the stands. Now, if that were happening, and it kind of is, would the governor of Mississippi take such churlish pride in insisting that he wasn't going to do anything about it? I mean, how did the next 191 people feel about taking their tickets and going to the game? I mean, it's not a huge stadium, but basically you're saying 2 or 3 people in every section of the stadium. Imagine announcing that over the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to whatever the hell the name of this stadium is. Ole Miss is going to kick somebody's ass. Hooray. Yeehaw. Whatever you would say at such a game. But everyone, please look at your tickets and figure out what seat you're in, because we have a new sweepstakes. 3 people in every section, we're going to announce your seat. And at halftime, you die. How many people are going to go to the game? You got tickets. The tickets are free. Well, 98% of the people who attend the football game survive. I don't know whether it's looked at differently. And, of course, back down in some of these states, they'll say, I would die to go to an Ole Miss football game. All right, well, but I warn you that, that's only part of the population of the country. This is going to happen every week. 200 people at every Ole Miss game don't come home. I have a feeling that strikes you slightly differently. I mean, there are people for whom it has no impact because they're dedicated to the party line here. The first one I did, I just happened to see, among the first I did, I happened to see Kristi Noem out early with one of these things and pointing out, of course, if she's saying, well, South Dakota will stand up to defend freedom. Joe Biden, see you in court, she tweets. And I had to point out, 1 in every 425 residents of South Dakota has already died already. They're dead already. More to come from COVID. And I got an interesting answer from Ryan Wingate, who's just a guy, and says, where are you getting that data? I live here and am confident that is not true. Now it's hashtag Kristi 2024. So you get some idea of who he is. But I thought it was interestingly put, as opposed to F you liberal scum, where are you getting that data? I live here and I'm confident that it's not true. Well, I just have to talk to that guy, right? Well, the answer, of course, is where am I getting the data? I was getting it from Worldometers, but just to be sure, I checked the South Dakota Department of Health's own COVID dashboard gives the same number. Their numbers for the deaths match, and their numbers for population, well, they don't have a number for their population on their dashboard, but the Worldometers number for the population of South Dakota matches the Census Bureau's numbers. So, I am sure that there's a Republican somewhere who will dispute the accuracy of the census, or how dare you take the government's word for it about how many people live here. We want to count them ourselves, whatever it is. But, you need a number. Everyone seems to agree on that number, and that's how it works. It may be that he's just never done the calculation. 2,709 deaths from COVID, and among 884,659 in population, which I'm still not clear on whether those numbers are dynamic or not. I mean, are we basically saying that at the start, in 2019, the Census Bureau said there were 884,659 people in South Dakota, but now there's 882,000 because 2,700 of them are dead. But anyway, look, you just do the numbers. The population divided by the number of people who have died, that's 425. 884,659 divided by 2,079. I'm sorry, not 2,700, but 2,079 is 425.52. So there's a little remainder there. But yeah, 1 in every 425 people are dead. It might be that he's just never done the calculations. But of course, the answer to that was, he comes out eventually and says, I'm willing to take my chances on a 0.0174 mortality rate, which is a 1.7% mortality rate. I had COVID. I am here. These deaths are wildly exaggerated by your, shepherd. Keep following, sheep. Your president and his administration are single-handedly ruining this country. Kristi Noem, killing South Dakotans left and right. The thing is, they're not killing, I don't think, white, suburban, ex-urban people all that quickly. Whereas perhaps the more rural, who might be speeding things along by eating ivermectin paste, but worse, very early on anyway, in the pandemic's toll on South Dakota, a large part of the native population was getting COVID and falling ill and dying from it. And so it might just be that they don't care about that. Of course, also in the meat processing plants, we discussed this briefly in passing, really, the other day, about the number of workers in these high-risk frontline emergency worker jobs, and it turns out that was meat packing. And a lot of them are immigrants and aren't all that integrated into the community and basically live in and around the meatpacking plant, more or less keeping to themselves, trying to keep their heads down so they didn't get in trouble during the Trump administration and end up getting deported and dying of COVID to feed the country and the world. But not Ryan. In his little world, people who got COVID more or less survived. But look, fact to fact, South Dakota admits that 2,079 of them have died. This is your population. That's the answer. So anyway, I did take time out to tell them, I actually don't care how you feel about this. This is just where the statistics come from, and I don't really care what you do with them once I give them to you and give you the source. That upset him quite a bit, and blah, blah, blah. And he goes on to yell and scream about various other things, and, what can you do? That was the real motivation. Oh, yeah? Where are you getting your statistics? Right here. Well, other things that I want to scream about. Well, that's the end of our conversation. But it went on, I pointed out as Brian Kemp came out with his statement of opposition that 1 in every 450 residents of Georgia has already died. And that's like going to a Georgia Bulldogs game and 206 people drop dead in the stands. It's the same thing in Arizona, right? Fill Sun Devil Stadium to capacity, 141 people die, because in Arizona, 1 in every 380 residents already dead from COVID. You're starting to get the idea? It's pretty shocking, quite honestly. But yada yada, you're all sheep for putting on masks. I don't think they would stand for it. It certainly wouldn't be the same result if Brian Kemp and Doug Ducey and Kristi Noem and who else did we do? Tate Reeves and Greg Abbott in Texas, where it's 1 in every 480 people. If Al-Qaeda killed 200 people in the stands at a UT football game, would Greg Abbott say, well, we're going to fight against Joe Biden using the military to strike back against an Al-Qaeda training camp, whether it be in Afghanistan or anywhere else? You would think not, but it is Joe Biden, and these are Republicans, and they'll find a way to say they oppose defending the lives of Americans somehow. They're doing it right now. So I guess you don't have to look too far. Anywho, so that's kind of where we stand with these nuts at this point. Let's see. We got other things to announce here? Probably. Let's see what comments have come in and story suggestions over the Twitter wires in the past half hour, 25 minutes worth of rant. Oh, I should have looked at what I was supposed to be doing when Bill tweeted that the show was live. Why is Kagro X running around his neighborhood with a garden rake yelling, F those bums? Well, now you know. Let's find out. We did. He notes also, parenthetically, the police might eventually get involved. Many people are saying that's true. Look out for an officer was seen observing the scene at a distance, and a projectile of its own volition left his firearm, not because he wanted it to happen, but because freedom, and then boom, I'm gone. But, chances are kind of low. You know what I look like, right? So anyway, that's about where we are with this. Oh, look at this. Now, Truro Renfro has this comment. It's happening right now. Not just the show. He does start out by saying Daily Kos is live. It's happening right now, but something else is happening right now. Unlike my son's school, what's happening at the son's school is nothing, because it's been closed for 7 out of the last 10 days, thanks to COVID, I guess. In the words of Dem from Connecticut, we have it here. Shall we have, we'll have Greg say it for you. Remember, everybody.
Oh my fucking God, get the fucking vaccine already, you fucking fucks.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the story. Well, wow. I didn't realize that that your school, anyway, or your son's school, was closed for, I figured it was happening somewhere. I just didn't know it was happening to you. Well, thanks for the update. Let's see. Okay. Well, we're getting towards our first break. We managed to rant all the way to it. There's other things to catch up on, though. I guess one of the other things that's been steaming me for the last day or so, I was just recently reminded, as we play ourselves out to the next break, of Kellyanne Conway. I was reminded of her existence, and that pissed me off. She, of course, one of the Trump people who got planted, left behind, embedded on the advisory boards for the service academies, where Biden is now basically telling them, resign or I'll fire you, and she was screaming and crying about it. Sean Spicer, too. You would likely have seen her reaction, but boy, oh boy, can't take it with her. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay. So, as I was leaving and starting to get worked up about Kellyanne Conway, but she and Sean Spicer and a few others are among those embedded in the advisory board roles at the service academies. I don't think I even put one of these stories aside because it's kind of small potatoes just in terms of the fight that's going on here. But I bring her up only because I was reminded recently, seeing the video recirculated on Twitter of Kellyanne Conway's, I guess if you had to isolate one or another of her statements, particularly as communications director or whatever it was she called herself while at the White House, I guess one of the worst would be the time she was early on in the pandemic asked by reporters, what are you doing? How come we didn't roll out tests earlier? Why was the administration so unprepared to stop this in the early stages? And she gave that answer of, why couldn't you do something to contain this? And she said, it is very disdainful. And she's the look on her face and the way she says things, and she barely even looks up at the reporter. She's kind of looking at her phone the whole time. It is being contained. Do you not think it's being contained? You remember that one, right? I mean, it was one of the more outrageous things to have said. At the time that she said it, of course, it was like March 6th, 2020. So you could say there was no telling just how bad things were going to get at that point. But it was pretty clear, one, that there was some serious downside potential. And two, well, the administration really wasn't doing anything. She wasn't going to acknowledge that. And you could guess wrong and pretend that you thought that there really wasn't that much danger from COVID. But really the point is, by no means should you have been so disdainfully confident, overconfident in your own wrong position. It is being contained. Do you not think it's being contained? When she said that, of course, the situation was brand new, of course. But it was still bad and getting worse, and the country was already bracing for some major impact. But when she said it on March 6th, we now know, at the time we didn't know exactly how many cases there were, but we now estimate that there were some 319 cases in the country. Back at the time, the estimate was probably lower, and it wasn't that many days since Trump had said it's 15 cases in this country, and soon it'll be down to 0, which was another one of the most egregious statements ever. But I just went to the Worldometer's line graph that they have of total cases in the country and total deaths in the country, and marked where is March 6th on all this. So, however you want to describe the curves, these are at the flat ends at the beginning of the thing. There's everything yet to come. 319 cases. We're now at, of course, over 41.5 million cases. So, it is being contained. It went from 300 to 41.5 million. What a great job of containment. There were 15 deaths in the country. There are now more than 675,000. Do you not think it's being contained? Well, you know what? No, I don't, Kellyanne. And I can speak with some experience now, but putting that on the record, as opposed to we're doing everything we can. What do you want us to do? This is a novel situation. You could fess up to it like that, or you don't even have to. You could just say, look, we're doing everything that we can do to contain this thing. And I'm confident we'll do a great job and beat it. That'd be wrong, but not, whatever, not so dismissive of the problem and venomous. She was horrible. You saw the statement. And I guess I could play the whole thing just so you have your memory refreshed about just how bad this was. It's not that long of a clip. I'll have to mark it and put it in pockets so that I can pull it up on the show computer. But she goes on then, of course, to attack the reporter for asking the question and say, you're a liar, basically, to this. Let's listen to this thing. Let me bring it up here. I got to go to the original, I guess. And it's probably going to take me a second to click and get the volume up, and then I'll have to rewind the thing and yada yada, but bear with me for a second. All right, let's see. There's
this contained. But during that time, why did the administration send out more tests and work to get hospitals prepared? Even today, the state of Florida is saying they can't test everyone per the...
Now, mind you, that's the state of Florida saying we can't handle this thing on March 6th, 2020. But that's neither here nor there. Listen to Kellyanne's answer.
Administration's guidelines because they don't have enough tests.
So you're asking a couple different things there. I'll try to just give some facts.
Try to give some facts. Well, that's not going to happen, for one thing. But the visual part of this is unbelievable, too, right? She winds up her question, this reporter, and Kellyanne, rolls her eyes, basically, and gives her side eye and tilts her head and looks at her like, okay, reporter, pat, 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 I'll answer your stupid question. I'll just try to give some facts. Now watch as she, A, gives no facts, and B, gives one of the cockiest wrong answers you could ever give, and then goes on to attack the reporter.
The HHS secretary said this morning that we're ramping up. We're ramping up with the commercial labs.
Why didn't they do it while it was contained? Get ahead of it.
It is being contained. And do you not think it's being contained in this
I'm
country?
not a doctor, I'm a lawyer.
Well, but you said it's not being contained. So are you a doctor or a lawyer when you say it's not being contained? That's false. You just said something that's not true.
That whole thing, that whole thing is just an exercise in getting around to, you just said something that's not true. Therefore, you're a liar. Therefore, you're less than me. And now you have to take this lecture from me. She said, well, it's not being contained. Do you think it's not being contained? Yeah, I do, because it isn't. Well, are you a doctor? No. I mean, I don't know why she said I'm a lawyer, but, well, are you a doctor or a lawyer when you say it's not being contained? Well, duh, what kind of question is that? I just told you I'm a lawyer. I didn't magically become not a lawyer when I said it wasn't being contained, but I wasn't saying it in my capacity as a lawyer. I'm saying it as in my capacity as a person with eyes who's watching it not being contained. Well, is it not? You say it's not being contained, but it is being contained, and so therefore you just said something that's not true, and therefore you're a liar. Well, it isn't being contained, so I'm not wrong. And in fact, you are. And now she's like, well, why can't I continue to serve on the advisory board for the service academies, being an egregious liar, and basically because the administration sent her out to cover for the fact that they weren't doing anything because they thought it was only going to catch on in Democratic states and kill Democratic voters, basically accessory to their murder. But can't I please still stay on this board? And the answer, of course, to that is no. You still serve at the pleasure of the president. And there's not much doubt about that, unless, of course, we're all pre-wrong and the shadow docket Supreme Court decides to say, nah, we're going to throw out all the precedent and let Kellyanne Conway, the liar and accessory to murder, stay there. Anyway, but just I don't know. I just found that to be a real crock, to say the least. And the sort of thing that really should follow her around for the rest of her life. If I believed that it was something that would actually embarrass her. But, the only way to make this have an impact on her life is not only to repeat this to her every day. That she won't care about. I just wish there was somebody who could walk around with a video screen and have this playing on an endless loop. And while she's in the bank trying to get a loan for a mortgage or something, just let everybody know what a liar she is. Trying to land a new client, let everybody know what a liar she is. And with what disdainful glee she will lie about the fact that they're killing people and don't give a damn. And isn't it really your fault for asking? I just found that as irritating as hell. And I'm sure you did too. So it's F you, be miserable Friday here on the show. And how's it going so far? Is it working? All right, let's see. A couple of other things that others have suggested for discussion on the show. All right, let's see. Rebecca Romans, I have a backlog of suggestions from Rebecca, I think. Let's take a look at what they are in reverse chronological order. That is to say, reverse of the order that she intended me to read them, and I don't know whether that will affect things or not, but let's make the show exciting and find out. First of all, she passes on the tweet of Gabe Ortiz. Hi, Gabe, who says, as the Senate parliamentarian who is an employee of the chamber is set to hear immigration arguments today. That was the bird bath we were talking about yesterday, I think. But I guess there's probably, maybe there's more going on today. But Greg mentioned it, or maybe he said it was slated for today. As the Senate parliamentarian who is an employee of the chamber, true, is set to hear immigration arguments today, Democrats should remember that they're the ones in charge. And sure, why not? By the way, how likely is it that Democrats will fire the parliamentarian in order to override her decision about including or excluding immigration provisions from a reconciliation bill? Probably very low. Probably zero or close to it. Not the sort of thing that they like to do. Also not necessary. I know that people sort of think of it that way. Well, why don't you fire the parliamentarian and hire a parliamentarian who will say yes? You can also just say, keep the parliamentarian, but throw her ruling over and just say, never mind. We're going to do it our way. You're a good parliamentarian. You might even be right about this, but we don't care at a very high level and high rate. And if you got to, of course, have a majority of the Senate on hand to do it. But, and that's highly doubtful given the makeup of the Democratic Senate caucus, but it's out there as a possibility. You don't have to fire her. I mean, we want to keep our unemployment numbers low, right? So anyway, let's see. Gabe goes on and tweets a couple more pieces here. Oh, and I see Joan weighs in here and has a piece about it on Daily Kos. Let's see what's worth mining from this. Gabe continues. It's beyond the significant economic benefits. There is a strong precedent for the inclusion of legalization, that is, of immigration in this country, or of undocumented migrants in this country, I should say, legalizing their status. There is precedent for including it in a budget reconciliation package, according to an American Progress article that Gabe cites. In 2005, the Republican-controlled Senate overwhelmingly passed a version of what ultimately became the Deficit Reduction Act through reconciliation, containing several relevant immigration provisions. And a quote from Joan, who then chimes in and says, "Yep, I said that, I guess. It's not up to the parliamentarian, it's up to the majority and whether or not they want to fight for what they believe in. It takes one senator and a presiding officer, in this case probably would be Vice President Harris, to challenge that ruling. And it takes, of course, 50 to overrule that ruling. But yeah, there it is. It is up to the majority in the Senate. And you know what our majority among the Democrats tends to do with these things. Unfortunately, they tend to let them slide and allow the ruling to stand. Anywho, yes, fireable, but something I'm sure they hope to avoid. I think I did see somebody else commenting on the subject the other day, and I don't know whether I had a separate point to make about it or not, but you certainly don't have to fire the parliamentarian in order to get this done. And there's not much, there's not even any guarantee that the next parliamentarian will agree with you, but if it's a close call inside the parliamentarian's office, sometimes you have some of the junior parliamentarians saying, I would read it this way. And you could fire the parliamentarian and elevate that person. Among the other suggestions Rebecca has made, let's see. She has grabbed the Media Matters tweet here. Even by their standards, Steve Bannon and OAN's latest false claim of mass voter fraud in Arizona is painfully stupid. I feel like we probably don't even really need to read that piece to know that that's the case. But her comment here, Steve Two Shirts is painfully stupid. Color me surprised. What are they claiming out there in Arizona? Let's take a look at that and be prepared for some pain, I guess. Unless Eric Kleefield is just exaggerating about it being painfully stupid. Let's see. Far-right media voices such as former Trump senior advisor Steve Bannon and the figures at One America News are amplifying a claim that, drumroll, there's got to be a drumroll sound out there for me to take. What sounds do I have available that are anything like a drumroll? Nothing sounds like it, but what could I guess I could just play Greg again. Drumroll, please.
Oh my fucking God, get the fucking vaccine already, you fucking fucks.
Okay, it's not a drum, but still, I don't know. Somehow people are big fans of that little clip. What are they doing? Amplifying a claim that hundreds of thousands of fraudulent votes were cast in Arizona. That's not only not that, it's dumb, but it ain't new. How so? All right. Hundreds of thousands of fraudulent votes cast in Arizona. But as it turns out, the Republican activists making this claim surveyed only a few thousand people, and the conclusions they've drawn from those individual contacts are already being dissected and debunked. Media Matters has a way of taking these gotcha busted articles and really drying them out. But so what are we saying here? That Republican activists surveyed a couple thousand people and said, did you cast any fraudulent votes? Yes, I did. There you have it, folks. Well, anyway, Bannon has promoted questionable data claims in the past as part of his push for forensic audits, in scare quotes, of the ballots cast in all 50 states, which he and others on his show maintain could result in the decertification of the 2020 election and prove that former President Donald Trump actually won. President Biden, of course, won the election with around 81 million votes nationwide against about 74 million for Trump and a 306 to 232 margin in the Electoral College. Bannon has also championed the cause of the Arizona Senate's ongoing audit in the state's largest county, as has a reporter for the right-wing media outlet One America News. Probably all of them have, really. With the network pushing to spread the effort to more states, one OAN host has been even more ambitious than Bannon, predicting that the audits would lead not just to rejection of the 2020 election, but also to mass executions, which is always a good place for TV reporters to land in terms of predictions. Okay. Audit organizers have since asked for permission to canvass voters door to door now. They've audited the vote. They've found nothing. But what about if we asked everyone in Arizona to vote all over again, basically? How would it come out then? All right. Well, the Justice Department has already warned that canvassing door to door could violate laws against voter intimidation. But the canvassing effort behind the claims of fraudulent votes is not actually part of the official Arizona audit. Instead, Republican activist Liz Harris and a group of her compatriots have gone door to door as private citizens, personally canvassing residents to ask whether they voted in the 2020 election. I mean, if you're just asking, did you vote? I don't know what it's going to tell you, but I guess it's not violative necessarily of people's rights. Harris has also denied previous reports that canvassers had impersonated real election officials in so doing. By the way, of course, just a brief reminder of the outrage of Republicans who promised everything from revolution to shooting census workers with their wife's pink shotgun, Eric Erickson, if people bothered to even come to their door to ask how many people live there and would you please fill out the census. No reports so far of Democrats, prominent or otherwise, threatening to shoot Republicans going door to door to ask whether anybody voted. But hey, freedom. Could happen. Curiously, though, during Harris's appearances on OAN to hype her supposed findings, OAN personality Christina Bobb introduced Harris as having, quote, led the canvassing effort here in Arizona for the Arizona 2020 election audit, which she did not. That's the whole point. In a separate segment, Bob acknowledged the distinction that Harris's activities were supposedly separate from the state Senate's official audit, which is also not, not particularly official, but there it is, and that things had been done in this manner because of a need to avoid litigation. Okay, so, worth noting, the reason that private citizens are trying to conduct this stupid canvassing is because if the state were to do it, they could get in real trouble, and they don't want to be in that trouble. Whereas if these private citizens do it, they could also be in real trouble, but they don't give a crap about whether they're arrested or not. They view it as a badge of honor somehow. Harris is, of course, totally qualified to be doing this. She is a real estate agent and an unsuccessful candidate in 2020 for the Arizona legislature, who also made previous claims of vast election fraud, such as saying that over 2,000 people had registered to vote from the same street. However, USA Today in January deemed that claim false, noting that the alleged address was not listed anywhere. So that's not so good for her. As Media Matters has previously documented, Harris also has a history of promoting the QAnon conspiracy theory and has connections to key players within the Arizona audit. Bad news for the audit, of course, but the whole thing was bad news, so no big deal. Appearing Wednesday on Bannon's War Room Pandemic, that's the podcast, I guess, Harris boasted that the number of people that we interviewed was equivalent to the size of a city, of an average American city, as a matter of fact. It was actually larger than the average American city. She wanted to say, in fact, it was the biggest city in America. Yeah, that's the ticket. You can see how this interview is proceeding. Harris made a number of claims about canvassed voters, saying they included people who said they had voted but were not recorded as having actually cast a ballot, as well as saying other ballots were sent to addresses that turned out to be vacant. And when we extrapolate it, it is the equivalent of 3 Sun Devil stadiums. She's using the football stadiums too. Well, we'll see if I can jujitsu this whole thing and use the Sun Devil Stadium to my advantage. Well, anyway, she said this, referring to the venue, of course, of the Arizona State University football team. But as she revealed in the same interview, Harris said her group knocked on 11,708 doors and got responses from 4,570 out of that. That is a very small American city. Thus, she is extrapolating from the answers to her small survey in order to claim that there must also be hundreds of thousands of fraudulent or missing votes statewide. Her questionnaires also fail against the obvious objection that a significant number of people will tell a stranger that they voted in an election when they really did not. Later in the interview, Bannon asked Harris how people, quote, not just simply in Arizona, but throughout the country, how do you get engaged here? How do they get involved? Harris gave her website address and then held up an image of a series of falling dominoes with the first labeled Arizona. So that's science right there. You see how that works? Okay. No science will prevent the phone from ringing during the show anymore. I guess we're just going to have to... can we throw it out and get a new one? How about that? That's what we do every couple of years when the timer like this drops dead. Anyway, I think a lot of people know me for this great meme, the dominoes one. And it's, may Arizona be the first domino to fall, Harris said. And I think we've done it. Yes, I don't think there's any doubt, Bannon replied, except so far they haven't reversed any election results and haven't even announced that they've done anything yet. However, it is a picture of some dominoes, and the first one is labeled Arizona. So that's pretty solid. Another frequent Bannon guest, election conspiracy theorist Seth Keshel, further promoted canvassing and audits in other states, saying there are many methods of which these elections can be validated or invalidated. That is, I was going to say, well, that's true, but it doesn't mean anything, but it's not even true because the syntax of the sentence is so bad. I guess if it read, there are many methods by which these elections can be validated or invalidated, the answer is, well, that's true, although there are very few by which the elections can be invalidated because that almost never happens. But lots of ways that they can be validated. Bannon then questioned why we're dealing with, quote, this radical agenda, referring to Democratic policies being passed by majorities in Congress, when the 2020 Senate races in Arizona, Georgia, and Michigan could also be, quote, up in question. And the answer, of course, is because those people have been sworn into Congress and they're going about their business. But I'm just asking questions and wearing 5 shirts. Right? I'm wearing many hats, but even more shirts. So therefore, listen to me be an idiot. Just to be clear, the Senate races that Bannon were named were won by Democrats with margins ranging from 55,000 votes to over 90,000 votes. So anyway, more about right-wing figures screaming about fraud in this very lengthy and somewhat dry recitation of facts from Media Matters, but well worth bringing up just to check in on what's going on in Arizona these days. They're like way late with their report, and everybody knows that they're going to be forced to report that they didn't find anything. And I guess we're all supposed to wait with bated breath for that to happen. I don't know how to bait my breath exactly, but it's probably something we could look up during the next break. All right, let's see. What else have we got here? More from Rebecca, who says, good luck to the DOJ in passing on the tweet of Lawrence Tribe, who says, DOJ's direct shot at the heart of the Texas gambit. It doesn't even deserve to be called a law, the abortion gambit, I guess is what he's talking about here, looks to me more deft and powerful than the several litigation strategies I've floated publicly, all of which I'd now call Plan B. So he is in favor of our reading this LA Times write-up on the Justice Department's pushback against the Texas abortion ban. Let's see what they're up to, because I did see that they floated early on a lawsuit that really, I read the statement, and it was this strong statement about how they were going to stand up against, they were going to use federal law to stand up against Texans being intimidated by threats into not seeking an abortion. And I thought, well, that's a good thing, but that's not exactly what we're talking about here. And I don't know that every court in the country would consider that to be an applicable statute. The threat being you might get sued. It looks like they could refocus this and do better somewhere else. And then very shortly thereafter, they did. And I guess they even impressed Lawrence Tribe with the response. Here's what the LA Times has on it, or at least what they'll let us read about it. It's a column rather than a straight news article. Justice Department's simple lawsuit could strike back effectively against Texas's abortion ban by Harry Littman, who writes, and is there a description of Harry? Sure. He's the legal affairs columnist of the opinion page at the LA Times, a former U.S. attorney and deputy assistant attorney general. And that seems quite enough in terms of explaining where he's coming from. Let's see. I'm sure he's also a dad and a, jazz lover. I'm just guessing about that. But anyway, we now have the Department of Justice's answer to the Texas abortion ban, and it's spare, straightforward, and unusual. This is dated from yesterday, so we're up to date here. Both Attorney General Merrick Garland and President Biden vowed to marshal every federal resource against the law. Tennis. That's Texas Senate Bill. Tennis 8. Just fine, tennis. Texas Senate Bill 8, which is patently, or if you prefer patently, unconstitutional in preventing abortions that are plainly protected under Roe v. Wade and its progeny. We've got our break coming up, but let's give you a taste of what's happening here before we go out. The Justice Department opted to file a lawsuit directly against the state of Texas. Garland called it plainly, in enacting extreme constraints on the performance of abortions. And combining that with a bizarre and mean-spirited enforcement scheme, Texas's goal, quote, was to make it too risky for an abortion clinic to operate in the state, thereby preventing women throughout Texas from exercising their constitutional rights while simultaneously thwarting judicial review. Well, we can evaluate how it worked and how the DOJ strategy might work after we return from this short break. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with the LA Times piece from Harry Littman about the Texas abortion law and the DOJ response here. As we said, as we left for the break, the idea here, according to the DOJ, their view of it is that Texas's goal was to make it too risky for a clinic to operate in the state, thereby preventing abortions, preventing women from exercising their constitutional rights, that is, while simultaneously thwarting judicial review. Well, it worked. To date, the department lawsuit continues. Abortion providers have ceased providing services prohibited by SB 8, leaving women in Texas unacceptably and unconstitutionally deprived of abortion services. Yet, despite this flagrant deprivation of rights, SB 8 remains in effect. Various scholars had presented concrete strategies for fighting back against the Texas statute, premised on the point that it invested private persons with the power to enforce SB 8 by bringing civil lawsuits against abortion providers and abettors, including collecting $10,000 and attorney's fees. Many different federal laws make it illegal to deprive people of their constitutional rights, acting, quote, under color of state law. Lawrence Tribe, whose tweet brought us to this, emeritus professor of law at Harvard, suggested that anyone taking up the invitation to be an abortion bounty hunter could be subject to imprisonment or fines under Federal Criminal Code Section 242. I posited that private persons could sue bounty hunters under the Civil Code, turning the tables on the bounty hunters by subjecting them to compensatory and punitive damages and attorney's fees. Others have cited actions related to the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. That's FACE. I've seen that. But in the end, after what was surely an intensive intra-department discussion involving Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta and Acting Assistant Attorney General Brian Boynton, these options may have seemed too narrow in their own ways and therefore ill-fitting. Instead, the Justice Department has brought suit with a bare-bones complaint under its general authority and responsibility to ensure that Texas cannot evade its obligations under the Constitution. It also cites the federal government's obligation to protect abortion in the case of rape and incest, which are not exceptions in the Texas statute, as we famously found out a few days ago. This simple approach is unusual, but not unprecedented. A 2012 case against Arizona took a similar tack of asserting the Constitution's preemption and supremacy clause to undo an Arizona scheme that tried to negate federal enforcement of U.S. immigration laws. The district court entered an injunction, and the case was eventually settled. Texas can be expected to jump up and down, challenging the Justice Department's strategy, asserting that the feds are trying to be all-purpose enforcers of U.S. law, even in the absence of a particular case or controversy. But the department can parry that there is, in fact, a case and a controversy. Texas's cheeky state versus federal government effort to undo Roe v. Wade, the law of the land, and prevent court review of its unconstitutional action. The action Thursday signals that criminal charges aren't in the offing against SB 8 abortion bounty hunters. That's no surprise. An enforcement lawsuit brought on the basis of SB 8 would, after all, rely on a duly enacted Texas statute. That law may be an outlier, but it's still state law for now, and that alone could trigger reticence on the part of federal prosecutors, as well as give rise to a persuasive defense against sending someone to jail for invoking it. Civil lawsuits against wannabe SB 8 enforcers might still go forward. But the real issue at this point, and one that never should have been a problem in the first place, is freezing enforcement of the Texas statute altogether by getting an injunction in district court based on the Justice Department's lawsuit, and then allowing the law to be judged on its merits. Indeed, if the Justice Department case reaches the Supreme Court, look for the court to do what it could and should have done 2 weeks ago, hold the case while it considers Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, the Mississippi 15-week abortion ban due for oral arguments sometime this fall. Once the justices determine in that case whether Roe remains good law, the SB 8 case can return to Texas federal court to apply that ruling. It may be hard to accept all this maneuvering as a triumph for abortion rights already on the books, but in the dismal slough the Republicans in Texas have dragged us into, with women forced into unwanted pregnancies and clinics closing their doors, keeping SB 8 at bay while the battle over its merits is joined would be no mean achievement. So, there you are. I think well put. And, I think the DOJ strengthened its case over the past couple of days. And we can look forward to perhaps more likelihood of success if there's still a rule of law in the country. And I guess we'll find out. I would say soon enough, except probably not soon enough. It's already too late to find this out. Okay, let's see. Rebecca on a tear here. There's quite a few suggestions. And I don't know if we can cover them all. I don't think so. Let's see. There were some other suggestions from other readers, listeners, in the past couple of days. One of which is a process issue of sorts, I think. Let's see. Adam McGinnis had sent this one the other day, a thread from Don Moynihan, who we've cited before, or at least we've seen his work on Twitter, a professor at Georgetown, who brings this to bear on the case of the appointments to the Service Academy advisory boards, where Kellyanne Conway landed and where Sean Spicer landed. Well, along with them is Russ Vought, Vought. Do you remember him? We've mentioned his name once or twice on the show. And he was, I think, OMB director or acting director, perhaps. Well, we had like 9 or 10 different acting directors of OMB and everything else. But Don Moynihan points out Russ is apparently one of those objecting to his removal from, in this case, the Board of Visitors to the U.S. Naval Academy. And he says, there's something incredibly rich about Russ Vought. refusing to resign from his Trump-appointed position to the Naval Academy after he tried and failed to turn 88% of OMB career officials into at-will political appointees back when he was in the so-called administration. He objects and says he's not going to resign. Don goes on to say, when he headed OMB, Vogt declared that the president has the right to fire career officials. Now, his position is that the president lacks the power to remove presidential appointees, much less career officials. He harkens back to his tweet about the subject back at the end of December of last year, maybe because he didn't like how OMB staffers would not go along with his illegal Ukraine actions. Vogt designated 88% of OMB career staff to be reclassified as political appointees, meaning he can fire them. So, isn't that interesting? He's going to turn career officials into presidential appointees under the claim that that means because they're appointees they can be fired. Yet he is a political appointee to the Board of Visitors for the Naval Academy and claims, I can't be fired, I'm a presidential appointee. That's pretty weird. The background here is that Biden is asking last-minute Trump appointees to various boards to leave their positions. He's pretty clearly in his rights to do this, for better or worse, and the objections by folks like Kellyanne, I can't even get her name out without choking on it, Kellyanne Conway, are just hypocrisy. Included here is a tweet from Andrew Kaczynski, who says, back then anyway, the Biden administration has told 11 appointees to military academy boards by the Trump administration to resign tonight or be removed. Officials asked to resign include Kellyanne Conway, Sean Spicer, and also, I had forgotten, H.R. McMaster. And in case we want a backgrounder on that, there is a CNN article attached. And I don't know. I'll include it in the roundup because I think you all know the story by now. Why is Biden within his rights? Don continues. See below. It is a tweet from Steve Vladek, whose name we've called on the past 3 shows at this point. University of Texas law professor, right? See below. And in recent years, courts, he goes on to say, have given more deference to presidents' removal powers. For example, he names a couple of cases which might mean nothing to you, but if you want to look them up, they are Lucia versus the SEC, Celia Law versus CFPB, and Collins versus Yellen from 2018, 2020, and 2021, respectively. Steve Vladek was, on September 8th, tweeting, plenty of statutes create terms for officers appointed by the president. For example, the 10-year term for director of the FBI. But unless the statute also includes removal protections, the officer still serves at the president's pleasure and can be fired even before the term is up. Now, Don continues, why is it hypocrisy for Conway, Spicer, Vogt, and others to complain about Biden removing them? For one thing, Trump created room on these types of boards for unqualified partisan appointees by removing qualified appointees. Where was their anger then? In other words, there wasn't a vacancy necessarily for Russ Vogt to occupy on the Naval Academy board, but they created one by firing somebody who was in the middle of their term. And that was okay with him, I guess, at the time. Again, Don referring to his own tweeting from December of 2020. Another attack on nonpartisan competence. The board is made up of leaders from government, the private sector, and academia. For example, the dean of the top-ranked school of public policy in the country was fired to make room for, checks notes, Corey Lewandowski. Which board was it that we were talking about at that time? I'll just take a look. It was, he was referring to Natasha Bertrand's reporting that the White House had removed 9 members of the Pentagon's Defense Business Board on Friday, back in early December of 2020, and installed people loyal to President Donald Trump in their place, including presidential allies Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie. I think we remember that story. Now back to, well, that's not going to do it. How come I've lost the thread there? Why doesn't that just go back to where we were? Well, anyway, now I'm stuck in Moynihan's earlier tweets. All right, here we go. Let's see. Why is it hypocrisy for Conway and Spicer? Because they did this to others. Secondly, Vogt and others claimed that the presidential authority to fire went vastly beyond current norms back at the time, including not just presidential appointees, but also career officials in an advisory role, allowing Trump to fire pretty much any civil servant he chose. Unless we were all, which was bad news, unless, again, we were all pre-wrong about that, and courts would just, shadow docket their way to allowing it. And who knows whether they ever would have gotten around to that. But they didn't in the time allotted to them. If anyone is interested in learning more about Trump's efforts to eliminate traditional civil service protections and Vogt's role in that process, I write about it in this forthcoming paper, which will be very long, no doubt. But you can find the link to it and read it if you like. And then finally concluding with video of Sean Spicer whining about it. Noted good government advocate Sean Spicer is taking his removal from a military board advisory board very well. All right. Are there other names that we may have missed in this? Andrew Kaczynski and M. Steck put together the CNN entry on all of these firings. Biden administration tells ex-Trump officials to resign or be dismissed. Let's see if there are any other names that we missed. Kellyanne Conway, Spicer, H.R. McMaster are listed there. Jen Psaki responding to questions about it. I'll let others evaluate whether they think Kellyanne Conway and Sean Spicer and others were qualified or not political, anyway, to serve on these boards. But the president's qualification requirements are not your party registration. They're whether you're qualified to serve and whether you're aligned with the values of this administration. Let's see. Other more prominent names include Heidi Stirrup, the former White House liaison to the Justice Department, who was banned from entering the building after she attempted to access secret information, sensitive information, about possible election fraud in December of 2020. I didn't realize that was the case with her. How about that? That's a hell of a story. Might have to open that and read that because I really didn't know about it. But a little bit reminiscent of Mike Flynn, who had to be fired from the Defense Intelligence Agency because he wouldn't stop with unauthorized access to various Pentagon computers too. Who else got fired? Retired Colonel Douglas McGregor, a former ambassador pick and Pentagon official with a history of controversial comments. The duo were appointed to the boards of the Air Force Academy and West Point. Other appointees asked to resign: Michael Wynn, who was appointed to the board of the Air Force Academy; retired General John Kane; Megan Mobbs, I don't know who any of these people are; and David Urban, whose name I believe we've heard, appointed to the board of West Point; and John Cole and Russell Vogt, who we know about, Trump's former director of OMB, appointed to the Naval Academy's board. The dismissal of Trump officials from the military advisory boards comes after the Pentagon has recently restarted its other advisory boards after removing hundreds of appointees from other boards in February. In November, just months ahead of when he was set to leave office, Trump dismissed several long-standing members of the Defense Policy Board ahead of their terms being up. The Military Academy Advisory Boards, according to the Air Force Academy website, were established to oversee the morale, discipline, social climate, curriculum, instruction, physical equipment, fiscal affairs, academic methods, and other matters relating to the nation's military academies. The boards meet several times a year. Its members provide independent advice and recommendations to the president, typically 3-year terms. At least one Trump appointee, Vogt, had signaled he will not resign. We'll see how that goes. Spicer said something spicy about it. Other people saying no way. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I think that's probably the bulk of what was interesting from that. But now I'm interested in Heidi Stirrup and what happened with her. That was reported also by CNN back in December 3rd of 2020. The White House liaison to the Justice Department was banned from the building. Caitlin Collins and Caroline Kelly reporting this old news that I'm just catching up with. White House liaison to the Justice Department barred from entering the building. I don't know which building, Justice Department or White House, after she attempted to access sensitive information about possible election fraud, CNN has learned. Heidi Stirrup was put in the position after Chief of Staff Mark Meadows informed federal agencies in September the White House was replacing all of their liaisons, which was widely seen as a move to install loyalists in the roles. But after only a short time on the job, Stirrup is no longer allowed at the Justice Department. That's the building. After she attempted to secure information that she was not privy to regarding potential voter fraud cases, a person familiar with the matter told CNN. So just outright espionage at that point. The Associated Press first reported this development. The White House Personnel Office did not immediately respond to CNN requests for comment. Justice Department didn't comment either. Stirrup appears to have already been placed in a new role. The White House announced Thursday she would be appointed as a member of the Board of Visitors to the U.S. Air Force Academy. Why not put a spy there? I think that's a great idea. Stirrup's pressure on Justice Department employees marks another example of the Trump administration inserting itself in deliberations surrounding alleged widespread election fraud. The Justice Department has found no evidence that there's been any fraud in last month's presidential election to the level suggested by President Donald Trump. Attorney General William Barr said in an interview with the Associated Press published Tuesday, but Trump has repeatedly made baseless claims of voter fraud. We know where that went. In the weeks since the election, blah, 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 culminating in an insurrection against the United States government on January 6th. Anything else? Other stuff that we actually knew. So that's the part of the story we didn't know about Heidi Stirrup being a spy and caught red-handed and then placed on the Air Force Academy Board of Advisors. Great call. Very Trumpy thing to do. So thanks, Adam, for bringing that to our attention, and thanks to Don Moynihan for pointing out just how ridiculously hypocritical it is for them to be whining about these things. Well, I was going to say at this juncture, but really ever. All right. Other interesting items and news for inclusion. I saw this morning. Relates to the top story of the Biden administration policies regarding COVID vaccination, etc. I just happened to see the tweet of Steve Shale, who I don't think I actually follow, or maybe I do. I don't know. I can't even tell. What was it? And it does say following. Okay. Well, ordinarily, that's very surprising. I don't think I would ordinarily be following him, but maybe, in his anti-Trump activity, I believe, I became somewhat interested, and I feel like we might cite him fairly frequently through Greg here, but he says, in August, we tested a concept similar to the vaccine proposal that Joe Biden unveiled today in the 5 states that flipped from Trump to Biden. Given how closely divided those 5 states are, this is about as much consensus as you will ever find. So I thought that was kind of an interesting premise. And here, the screen grab of question 35 in their poll. Do you favor or oppose major corporations requiring employees and contractors provide proof of vaccination, and employees that are not vaccinated will be required to wear a mask on the job, physically distance from all other employees, and comply with a weekly or twice weekly COVID testing? So, who favors it? I guess in total, they got answers of about 43% in favor, 22% somewhat favor. So a 65% response on favor. Oppose, somewhat opposed is 14%, strongly opposed 22%. So that's 36% in opposition. 65-36, is that, I guess, rounding involved in that. And just no answer. Really, nobody said not sure. That's interesting. I'm surprised by that. Now, it's broken down into those 5 states. And, of course, because they do strongly favor, somewhat favor, that leaves math to be done. But we'll just deal with the favorability for now, so that less math has to be done. As I said, the overall total 65% in favor of a plan pretty much like what Biden said. And that was in August, right? So that's not that long ago. But clearly the spike was on, and we still hadn't really hit the worst of it yet. I guess the peak, if what Greg keeps thinking might be a peak is in fact a peak, turns out to be a peak, it would have peaked right in between kind of this survey and today. Anyway, so the 5 states where they interviewed people, the close states that flipped from Trump to Biden: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. The infamous 5 where 80,000 votes combined determined the outcome of the presidential election in 2016. In Arizona, it looks like the numbers are even higher. The combination of strongly favor and somewhat favor are 68% favorability for this plan in Arizona. And in Georgia, 63% favorability, somewhat less than the overall total, but still, you'd pass the old Hastert test with, 63% certainly. We don't know what his current test is, I guess we do, nothing. But anyway, we don't know how his pedophilia colored things. 61% in Michigan, where, northern state, you might perhaps expect to see more, but remember how strongly or how organized, how strongly and organized opposition to all common sense measures against the virus was pushed in Michigan, up to and including let's kidnap and possibly execute the governor for doing things like this. I guess somewhat weaker support also, somewhat weaker than I would have expected in Pennsylvania, but still a total of 63% in favor. The breakdown there, only 36% strongly favor and 27% somewhat favor, but still in combination 63%. And over in Wisconsin, it is 68%, just as it is in Arizona. Wisconsin and Arizona are very strong, and the same numbers. 47% strongly favor it, the highest among the strongly favor numbers. 21% somewhat favor it, and really among one of the stronger somewhat favor numbers. Only Pennsylvania, where people were weaker on strongly favoring, was the number higher, 27 versus 21 in other states. And it's remarkably consistent across those states, too. Arizona, 47, Georgia, 42, Michigan, 42, Pennsylvania, 36, Wisconsin, 47. That's all strongly favor. So Arizona and Wisconsin almost at 50% strongly favor. You really can't mistake that. And for somewhat favor, Arizona 21%, Georgia 21%, Michigan 19%, Pennsylvania 27%, Wisconsin 21%. Opposition, really, strong opposition only rises to, at the highest level, 24%. That kooky 1/4 of people, 24% strongly oppose it in Michigan, where they were out to kidnap people. Otherwise, it barely cracks 20% in any of these 5 states. 20 in Arizona, 22 in Georgia, 24 in Michigan, 22 in Pennsylvania, 20 in Wisconsin. Wisconsin and Arizona are exact mirrors in every single category. They both report 47 strong favor, 21 somewhat favor, 12 somewhat oppose, and 20 strong oppose. That too is pretty serious. So, overall, what do we get out of this? 65% favor, 35% oppose, and that's, what can I tell you? That's pretty incredible. I thought that was an interesting addition to the discussion. We're going to take our next break in just a minute. And, we got any number of directions we can go in. I've got something to catch up on the COVID statistics and the grim news about where things may be going. And then maybe perhaps a more uplifting story that we could categorize as a Friday story, not something we would ordinarily cover, but let's save it as a surprise and see whether it makes any sense to share among the other things that we do with our last half-hour segment before breaking for the weekend. Okay, very exciting. Woo, it's Friday. Thanks, and we'll be right back after this short 2-minute break. Well, it's 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. After that 2-minute break, it wasn't a short 2-minute break. I mean, it's short as breaks go. You see what I'm saying. I just have to clarify everything on this show. Always something. Okay, let's see. Among the many stories that I thought we might share with you, I mentioned Charles Gaba. Is that the pronunciation I think I'm remembering, or am I making that up? I think I said GABA the other day, and then I something triggered in my head, and I said, now wait a second, isn't it different? Is it GABA? I don't know. I never did check on it. And look, all our communication is written, but brain wrap. You know who we're talking about. Anyway, he's been following the statistics on COVID in his own way. Of course, you will have seen that over the past, year and a half already. And he put something together that was kind of interesting and a little risky, and I'm sure he's, taking some flack for it in some places, but not from anybody that was like formally supporting him or anything like that. The angry right-wingers, I'm sure, unhappy about this. He writes an article he puts under the title of A Simple Actuarial Analysis, and he introduces it by describing, by making a movie reference. Although, it's not one of the more wildly popular movies in the world, but it's an apt comparison. Anyway, he begins this way. As I've been arguing for well over a year now, the COVID-19 pandemic was utterly politicized by the Trump administration right from the start. Certainly true. And the vaccination effort has been similarly completely politicized by the Republican Party since the moment President Biden took office as well. Aside from the massive public health fallout, this fact has all sorts of political implications as well, of course. Most of those involve pundits speculating about the blame game and so on. Will voters in states like Florida and Texas blame their governors for doing everything possible to stymie reasonable pandemic safety measures such as mask mandates? They should. Or will they blame the Biden administration for, not tying people to a chair and manually forcing the COVID vaccine into their arms? For weeks now, however, people have been asking me an even more basic and crass question about the impact of political tribalism on the 2022 midterm elections. As one Twitter user quoted here, H-Cursed, H-K-U-R-S-E-D, asks, what I really want to know is when the number of deaths in the Trump counties reach a point where they could turn the county blue through sheer attrition. I think everybody's been kind of wondering about this. As I've been saying, that this vaccine opposition plus COVID denialism is basically kind of, like a neutron bomb for morons. Like they're going to drop a bomb on an area and just wipe out only Trumpists. Like, what a great weapon that would be. If that was a good thing to do. Which it's not. And you shouldn't try to design it, and you shouldn't hope for it, and you shouldn't even wish that there was some magical way of doing it perfectly. But, you might find yourself doing that anyway. I don't know, how you're going to spend your day, and who am I to judge? I might ask. All right. Let's see. I have to make sure that my alarm is, in fact, stays off because it's snoozed rather than getting turned off. But you may have asked the same question, because at least two other people cited here ask similar questions. Somebody saying, my suspicion is that quite a number of Republican strategists are realizing this danger, and this is why in recent weeks Republicans have been a little more forthcoming on the vaccine. I haven't really seen them do a good job on that. But anyway, last comment here, somebody else's tweet. I wondered that for the middle two bars, thinking about, I guess, reacting to one of the bar charts that Charles has put out on this thing, would death rates secure future Dem wins in 40 to 50% of counties and give Dems, or rather 40 to 50% counties, I guess where it was evenly split, and give Dems greater chances in the 50 to 60% ones. It's a grotesque situation in every way. And yeah, I don't think it's quite reaching that level, but he does demonstrate that there is something to watch here. You get the idea. A bunch of people have asked me this, sometimes in a roundabout way, other times directly, like the first tweet. So, fine. Let's set our moral compass aside for a moment and look at this from a sheer actuarial analysis perspective. First, let's look at the national COVID-19 death rates broken out by 2020 presidential election results from the beginning of the pandemic in January 2020 right up through Election Day of last year, November 3rd, 2020. And by the way, I think I must have... Did I skip over the part, or did he take it out of there? There was a whole explanation somewhere in this. Oh, yeah, I guess he's moved it down to the bottom about the phrase of simple actuarial analysis. I thought that was at the top before, and I thought that was more effective up at the top. So, anyway, what he's done here is the first chart. I have to read it again to clarify it for myself. Look at national COVID-19 death rates broken out by 2020 presidential election results. And it's separated into bands of 10% here. The Trump vote from 0 to 10%, 10 to 20%, 20 to 30%, 30 to 40% in each county. Let's see, population totals, COVID deaths per 100,000, and through Election Day, and then as of Election Day. It's important to note here that data includes all 50 states plus D.C., but does not include several thousand COVID deaths in which the county of residence was unknown. I should also note that the population data, and therefore the per capita data, is based on the official 2020 census numbers for each county. And, well, let's see. I mean, it is a chart full of numbers, and it doesn't tell me a great deal. But, well, some of the things that jump out in the counties, for instance, that are the least Trumpy, 0 to 10% of the vote cast for Trump. The COVID deaths per 100,000 up to Election Day were about 90.9 deaths per 100,000 in up to Election Day. And then this is not normalized. This is the number. So this is actually quite, this isn't a comparison thing, but COVID deaths as of Election Day in the least Trumpy counties were just above 1,500 deaths, whereas it grows to 16,000 deaths in the 10 to 20% range, to 41,000 to 43,000 to 59,000 in the 40 to 50% Trump vote range, to 28 to 21 to 14.4, and oddly 57 deaths where the Trump vote is 90 to 100%. But again, you're talking about some of the lowest population counties. The normalization here is showing about 90 deaths per 100,000 in the least Trumpy counties, up to 109. The highest number, in fact, being where the Trump vote is only 10 to 20%. Then 98, 71, 70, 56, 52, 53, 58, 48. So, deaths per 100,000 up through the election anyway, actually still pretty concentrated in more Democratic areas. And then he goes on to say, here's what it looks like visually. It makes a bar chart. As you can see, the death rate in the bluest areas of the county was as much as 2.3 times higher than in the redder counties nationally. This is up through Election Day. Most of this is due to massive, ugly first waves in New York, New Jersey, and other Democratic-leaning states back in March and April of 2020. But what about after Election Day? For that, he says, I've had to break it into two time periods, from November 4th, 2020 through June 30th, 21, and then July 1st of 2021 until today. I had to do this for two reasons. First, because the beginning of July is right around the point that the far more contagious Delta variant started to pop up in the United States, but mostly because both Nebraska and Florida decided to stop reporting COVID deaths at the county level in June. Two bad places to make that choice. Nebraska actually stopped publishing any county level data on June 30th. Cases, everything. But at least they publicly announced it ahead of time. Florida, on the other hand, never really announced their decision to discontinue publishing county level COVID death data, which they seem to have done starting on June 4th. They just stopped. Florida's daily statewide COVID deaths stayed pretty steady through the rest of June, so I've been able to roughly extrapolate it. That's twice I've extrapolated here on the show today. For the period of June 4th through June 30th. But I don't feel comfortable trying to do that beyond June 30th, since, again, that's when Delta started to run rampant across the state and the rest of the country. So I guess in those two periods, COVID deaths, let's see, this is just the up to June 30th, from Election Day to June 30th. The numbers are somewhat different. The bluer areas are much, much lower in deaths per 100,000. 75.9, 78.1, 101.8 we'll round to, and 94.8 deaths per 100,000 in counties that went for Biden very clearly. That is under 40% of the vote for Trump. In the closer divided counties, 40 to 50 and 50 to 60% Trump votes, the COVID deaths per 100,000 are 102.8 and 108.6. Just slightly higher. Now, when it gets even more Trumpy, 60 to 70%, 70 to 80%, 80 to 90%, 90 to 100% Trumpy, the numbers grow to 132.2, 151, 169.4, and 202.2. If you're surprised, he then goes on to say there were more than 50%, or that there were more than 50% more Americans who died from COVID during the 8 months from the election through the end of June than there were in the 10 months from January to October of 2020, you shouldn't be. Remember, the daily death toll actually peaked in mid-January of this year, just before President Biden took office. So then the visualization, the bar chart again, showing that in the least Trumpy areas, we were talking about 76 deaths per 100,000, whereas in the Trumpiest areas, 202.2 deaths per 1,000. As you can see, from Election Day through the end of June, the situation completely reversed itself. The COVID-19 death rates in the reddest counties began to run higher than in the bluest counties, as much as 2.66 times as high, in fact. So, how does this play out in terms of red-blue sheer attrition, as one of the tweeters asked? First, you have to remember that not every American who's died of COVID since last November is a voter. A small percentage are either under 18 or aren't U.S. citizens. Even among those who are, total voter turnout among eligible voters last November was only around 66%. Historically high, but that still removes a good one-third from the equation right off the bat. That leaves perhaps 229,000 potential U.S. voters who died between Election Day and the end of June. The biggest unknown by far is what proportion of them were likely to vote Democratic or Republican in 2022. In the table below, I've made a spitball guesstimate about the proportions within each bracket. And this is a very large and complex looking chart. But if my assumptions above are close to accurate, which is admittedly a very big if, it would mean something like 87,000 Democratic voters and 124,000 Republican voters died during that time period, plus another 18,000 or so independents or swing voters, for a net loss of about 37,000 more Republican voters than Democratic nationally. And what about since the end of June? For that, I unfortunately have to remove both Nebraska and Florida from the equation since I don't have county-level COVID death data for either state. Even so, as I've noted before, the results are pretty jaw-dropping. Here's the bar graph with data starting on July 1st through yesterday, which at the time was September 7th. The y-axis scale is obviously much smaller since the total deaths are much lower, but the trend line is far more stark. Since the beginning of July, the death rate in the reddest counties has been as much as 7.6 times higher than in the bluest counties. The bluest of the blue, 3.7 deaths per 100,000. In the reddest counties, 27.7 deaths per 100,000. Given the dramatic increase in the red-blue trend line since the beginning of the Delta variant, I'm assuming the ratios are even more starkly divided. Again, assuming this is reasonably close, it would mean something close to 13,800 more Republican voters have died over the past 2 months than Democrats nationally. As for Nebraska and Florida, again, I'm reluctant to include this in the table above, but if you put a gun to my head, don't do it, I'd say the net GOP voter deaths since 6/30, that is June 30th, would be around 4,000 higher if both these states were included. Call it perhaps 18,000 more Republicans than Democrats having died of COVID since the end of June. If so, that'd be a total of perhaps 55,000 more so far this cycle. About 146,000 Republicans, 91,000 Dems, 20,000 swing voters or indies. What about going forward between now and November of 2022? Well, it's mostly an unknown, of course, but the biggest unknown is the total number of additional COVID deaths the nation is facing between now and then. Let's assume it ends up being something like 150,000 more Americans dying of COVID between now and then, at roughly the same ratios as in the June to September data above. That is, roughly 80% Republican and 15% Dems. That would boil down to something like 74,000 additional Republican voters and 14,000 additional Democratic ones, for a net loss of 60,000 more Republicans than Dems. And again, at the outset, you'll remember in the polling article, we were reminding everybody 80,000 votes across, 3 states made the difference in the outcome of the Electoral College. 60,000 of them may be wiped out in the middle of all this. The grand total would then stand at somewhere around 105,000 Democratic voters, 220,000 Republican voters, and 26,000 swing voters who have died nationally between Election Day, from Election Day to Election Day, or a net loss of perhaps 115,000 more Republicans than Democrats overall. Now, you would think that this would cause Republican leadership to be deeply concerned, but clearly they aren't. Why not? And here is the explanation for the title of the piece. In 1991, there was a great little courtroom drama directed by Michael Apted, do I have that right? Called Class Action, starring Gene Hackman and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. The story is about, and I guess grabbed from Wikipedia, the the synopsis of the plot. The story is about a lawsuit concerning injuries caused by a defective automobile. The suit takes on a personal dimension because the injured plaintiff's attorney, Jedediah Tucker Ward, discovers that the automobile manufacturer's attorney is his estranged daughter, Maggie Ward. The auto manufacturer in the film also utilizes a bean counting approach to risk management, whereby the projections of actuaries for probable deaths and injured car owners is weighed against the cost of retooling and remanufacturing the car without the defect, which in this case was an exploding gas tank, with the resulting decision to keep the car as is to positively benefit short-term profitability. Class Action's plot wasn't technically based on the infamous Ford Pinto scandal, but it sure as hell is analogous to it. There's a particularly chilling scene in which Master Antonio's character, who's actually defending the auto company in a lawsuit, privately asks one of the safety test executives at the company, played by Fred Thompson, remember him, why they didn't simply replace the faulty part in the first place. She asked, Maggie, may I ask a question, please? And his character, Fred Thompson, Getchell, says, sure. She says, why didn't you just change the blinker circuit? It's just a question. Well, I told Flannery about the problem a month or so before he died. He called in his head bean counter. What's that? A risk management expert, right? Yeah. Flannery shows him the data and asks him, how much would it cost to retrofit? You mean recall? Yeah, you got it. To retrofit 175,000 units. Multiply that times $300 a car, give or take. You're looking at around $50 million. So the risk guy, he crunches the numbers some more. He figures you'll have a fireball collision about every 3,000 cars. That's about 158 explosions, which is almost as many plaintiffs as there are. These guys know their numbers. So you multiply that times $200,000 per lawsuit. That's assuming everybody sues and wins. $30 million max. See? It's cheaper to deal with the lawsuits than it is to fix the blinker. It's what the bean counters call a simple actuarial analysis. Of course, that doesn't include how much you're paying the attorneys, but maybe they're already on retainer and they're sunk cost anyway. I don't know. But you get the idea. This is perhaps the most cynical thing I've ever typed in a blog entry, but there's no getting around it, Charles continues. GOP leadership, Fox News, Trump, MAGA, etc., don't appear to care how many of their own voters die as long as they damage Biden's approval rating in the process. While I'm sure they'd much rather every person who dies of COVID be a Democrat, losing 220,000 of their own supporters appears to be a small price to pay if it results in them flipping control of the House and or Senate next year. Furthermore, while that may sound like a high number, keep in mind that most of those either live in counties and therefore indirectly districts which are already pretty blue, or in counties or districts which are solidly red to begin with. A GOP congressperson used to winning with 75% of the vote isn't going to lose much sleep over that number being knocked down to 70% or even 65%. There may be a handful of swing districts which will be decided by just a few hundred votes where it ends up making a difference, but if losing 115,000 more GOP voters results in, say, 500,000 independent or swing voters flipping back to the GOP, or at least not bothering to vote, because, quote, Biden said he'd stop the pandemic and he hasn't, etc., then that would still result in a net gain for Team Red. And sure enough, via CNN, so far it's playing out exactly as they're hoping. The CNN clip here says, an ABC News Washington Post poll conducted at the end of August found 52% of respondents approve of how Biden is handling the pandemic, a 10-point drop from June. Still, more respondents said they approved of his handling of COVID than disapproved. At the same time, Biden's overall approval has slipped into negative territory amid a chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan and the Delta variant's drag on the economic recovery. The president's aides view combating the pandemic as the single most important issue of his presidency and one that will determine his political fate. Charles just adds here, get vaccinated, wear a mask, and reminds you of the simple actuarial analysis and what it means. That's could be what's going on with the Republicans. They say, yeah, we're losing more Republican voters by far than we are losing Democrats. But if so many people dying makes Biden look so bad that swing voters swing Republican, we win anyway. Kill them if it works. Of course, there's no guarantee that it will work, and they may be dead, and lots of other. It's a bad bet, but they're making it. There you have it. I don't know. That was pretty grim. I'll just throw that in there. Now, I said there was something that could possibly uplift you, and I haven't got the time to read it all, but I have got the time to recommend that you read it all. This is completely out of keeping with what we ordinarily cover, but it seemed very interesting. I just picked up on, I think Josh Marshall saw it reading through the New York Times and just said, wow, and gave the link, and, I can't resist that. I have to click on it. What's the wow? And the wow is the obituary of a doctor from the area who has died at 98 years of age that I think you might find interesting. I won't get all the way through it, but I'll give you a taste of what's going on. You might want to read the rest of the obituary. Joseph I. Kramer, the, quote, country doctor of Avenue D, dies at 96. Subheader here, shunning the New Jersey suburbs in 1969. He set up a pay-what-you-can practice on the blighted Lower East Side, and for 3 decades was a hero to the poor. Alex Traub wrote the obit here. Joseph I. Kramer, who tended to the afflictions of the poor as the self-described country doctor of Manhattan's Lower East Side for nearly 3 decades, a period beginning in 1969 when the neighborhood was infamous for urban squalor, died on August 30th at his home in Leonia, New Jersey. He was 96. So he went back to the New Jersey suburbs after all. But the death was confirmed by his daughter, Leslie Kramer. In the early 1960s, Dr. Kramer was working as a pediatrician in New Jersey's prosperous suburbs in Bergen County and seemingly on his way to fulfilling the dreams of his youth. A red Porsche and a getaway in the Bahamas. Yet he began to find work increasingly unfulfilling. It wasn't that exciting. Nobody was that sick. Well, okay, that's a little odd, but that's what he told the Bergen Record in 1990. Doctors outnumbered diseases. Mothers would call up if their babies had temperatures of 98.9, or they'd ask what color vegetables to serve. He felt, he later recalled, like an expensive babysitter. One night, he got a hysterical call and rushed to a patient's house, only to discover that the crisis had little to do with medicine. He returned home, called his partner, and gave away his share of their practice. Dr. Kramer soon began working in the Lower East Side, where he had been born, and in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn, where he had grown up. Now very fashionable, of course, and gentrified. He set up his own Lower East Side practice on Avenue D in 1969, at one point early on offering his services to a woman with a stroller at a fruit stand. He wound up diagnosing her baby with clubfoot. While his roster of patients grew, the neighborhood changed. Flower children and welfare rights activists gave way to crack dealers and prostitutes. In the parlance of many New Yorkers, Alphabet City's Avenue A stood for aware, Avenue B for beware, Avenue C for caution, and Avenue D, the last street before the East River, for death. Yikes. The hippies ended up going to law school or working on Wall Street, Dr. Kramer told the Bergen Record. I'm still here. He saw children with herpes of the brain. Yow. Active tuberculosis lesions or wounds from being pricked in the park by discarded hypodermic needles. He evolved from a pediatrician into a general practitioner, treating prostitutes, priests, bookies, Puerto Rican abuelas, and more. That's some grouping. His office was converted in a converted ground floor apartment in the Jacob Riis Housing Project, R-I-I-S, Riis Housing Project, where the living room served as a waiting room for crying babies alongside strung-out drug addicts. He would see 40 patients on an average day. Many arrived with relatives who had their own medical problems. A fridge held the medicine. Kitchen cabinets stored medical files. You get the idea here? Now, what's interesting is a caption for one of the pictures that illustrates the piece says, here's a picture of Dr. Kramer in 1996, the year he closed his practice. It wasn't the rise of AIDS, the spread of TB, the resurgence of measles, the Associated Press wrote in explaining his quitting. It wasn't his 71 years, and it wasn't the money. It was the paperwork. I bet Greg can testify to that. Anyway, I just thought that was a very interesting intro to a very interesting obit. You should absolutely read it. I'll include it in the roundup, which I'll have to put together on my own today as Scott is out and on his own. We'll be back next week, of course. Have a great weekend, and do stay tuned for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. Maybe we can even sneak in a preview of what's coming up, what he's got to serve.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Oh, yes. Well, a story we haven't paid any attention to. The Biden administration will make sure the Capitol is protected at the Insurrection 2.0 rally. Yes, they're planning on coming back to Washington, D.C. I think their target might not necessarily be the Capitol this time. Watch out for the White House as well. I don't really need to advise them on that. Stay tuned for more.